The golden light of dawn filtered through the dusty windows of Sarah Campbell's modest boarding room as she stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Today was supposed to be the day her life changed forever. The day a stranger would arrive at the train depot with $300 to claim her as his mail-order bride. Her fingers trembled as she pinned the small brooch, her mother's only heirloom, to her best traveling dress. The year was 1883, and at 22, Sarah was considered dangerously close to spinsterhood in Boston. The West, with its promise of a fresh start and a new life, had seemed like salvation when she'd answered that advertisement 4 months ago. The room she'd rented for the past week in Laredo, Texas, was sparse but clean. Mrs. Whittaker, the stern-faced widow who owned the boarding house, had been clear that Sarah could only stay until her intended arrived. "Mail-order brides aren't meant to linger," she'd said with a sniff. "Bad for business if men think unmarried ladies are taking up residence." Sarah smoothed her hands over her skirt, trying to calm her nerves. The man she was meant to marry, a rancher named William Peterson, had written only 3 letters. His penmanship was sloppy, his words few, but he'd promised a comfortable home and respectful treatment. It wasn't love, but it was more than many women could hope for. The clock on the mantel chimed 8. Sarah gathered her courage along with her single traveling bag. It contained everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, a Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents. Her father had died in the war when she was a child, her mother just last year from consumption. There was nothing left for her in Boston except memories and mounting debts. The walk to the train depot felt eternal. Laredo was already buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Cowboys and traders moved through the dusty streets, and Sarah kept her eyes downcast, ignoring the curious glances that followed her. A proper Eastern lady was still something of a novelty in this frontier town. The station was a simple wooden structure with a covered platform. The eastbound train had arrived 30 minutes earlier, disgorging its passengers before continuing on. The westbound train was due at noon. Sarah positioned herself on a bench where she would be visible to anyone looking for her, her hands clasped tightly around the handle of her bag. 1 hour passed, then 2. The westbound train came and went. Sarah watched as families reunited, as businessmen hurried off to meetings, as cowboys loaded cattle onto freight cars. No one approached her. No William Peterson came looking for a bride from Boston with auburn hair and green eyes. As the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, Sarah fought back tears. Her mouth was dry, her spirits sinking with each passing minute. Mrs. Whittaker would not let her stay another night without payment, and the last of Sarah's money had gone toward this morning's meager breakfast. "Excuse me, miss," the station attendant finally approached, his hat in his hands. "We're closing up soon. Are you waiting for someone?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes, Mr. William Peterson. He was to meet me here today." The man's face changed, pity washing over his weathered features. "William Peterson from the Double Creek Ranch." "Yes," Sarah said, hope flaring briefly. "Do you know him?" "I'm afraid Mr. Peterson passed away 2 weeks ago, miss. Fever took him fast. I'm mighty sorry to be the one to tell you." The world seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet. Dead. Her intended was dead, and no one had thought to inform her. She was stranded in a strange town without money or prospects. "I see," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for telling me." The attendant shifted uncomfortably. "If you need assistance finding accommodations, that won't be necessary," Sarah interrupted, pride the only thing keeping her upright. "I have arrangements." It was a lie, of course, but she couldn't bear his pity. The man nodded, relief evident on his face, and retreated to his office. Sarah remained on the bench, staring blankly at the horizon as the sun began its descent. Travelers and station workers dwindled until she sat alone on the platform, her future as empty as the tracks stretching into the distance. The sound of boots on wooden planks roused her from her stupor. A tall figure approached, silhouetted against the setting sun. Sarah blinked, trying to make out his features. "Miss Campbell." The voice was deep, with the slight drawl she'd come to recognize as Texan. Sarah stood unsteadily. Yes, as he came closer, she could see him clearly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky, He removed his hat, revealing dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. "I'm Adam Ellis. I worked for William Peterson." His expression was solemn. "I heard about your arrival from Tom over there." He nodded toward the station attendant who was locking up the office. "I'm sorry about Will. He was a good man." Sarah felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. Not for the loss of William Peterson, a man she'd never met, but for herself and the precarious position she now found herself in. "What will you do now, Miss Campbell?" Adam asked quietly. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go." Adam Ellis looked at her for a long moment, his gaze assessing but not unkind. Then he bent down and picked up her bag. "Come home," he said simply, extending his other hand to her. Sarah stared at him, confusion mixing with a tiny flicker of hope. "I don't understand." "The ranch needs a woman's touch," he said. "And you need somewhere to stay. It might not be what you came here for, but it's honest work and a roof over your head until you decide what's next." "You're offering me employment?" Sarah asked, trying to make sense of his proposal. "I'm offering you a chance," Adam replied. "Same as we would have, though different terms. You'll have your own room in the main house. Cooking, cleaning, helping with the accounts, whatever skills you've got. And if it doesn't suit you, I'll pay your fare to wherever you want to go next." It wasn't a marriage proposal. It wasn't what she'd traveled 2,000 miles for, but it was a lifeline when she was drowning, and Sarah wasn't too proud to grasp it. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis," she said, accepting his outstretched hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her own. "I accept your offer." Adam nodded once, as if the matter was settled. "My wagon's this way. It's about an hour's ride to Double Creek." As they walked through the now quiet streets of Laredo, Sarah felt the curious gazes of the few people still about. A woman alone with a man not her husband was cause for gossip, but she lifted her chin and walked steadily beside Adam Ellis. Whatever judgment came her way couldn't be worse than the alternative of being penniless and alone in a strange town. The wagon was simple but sturdy, with a team of 2 chestnut horses that stomped impatiently as they approached. Adam helped Sarah up onto the wooden seat before securing her bag and climbing up beside her. With a click of his tongue and a gentle snap of the reins, they were moving, leaving Laredo and its train depot behind. The fading sunlight painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Rolling hills stretched out before them, dotted with mesquite trees and the occasional cluster of cattle. In the distance, Sarah could see the silhouettes of mountains against the darkening sky. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. "Different from Boston, I imagine," Adam replied, keeping his eyes on the rudimentary road ahead. "Very, but in a good way, I think." Sarah took a deep breath of the clean, sage-scented air. "How far is the ranch?" "About 10 miles outside town. Not the biggest spread in the county, but good land with a reliable creek running through it. We'll built it from nothing after the war." Sarah hesitated, then asked, "How did you come to work there?" Adam was quiet for a moment. "I was 16 when the war ended. My family's farm in Tennessee was gone, my pa and older brother dead. Will Peterson was a lieutenant in my pa's unit. He found me trying to enlist for a war that was already over and offered me a job instead. Been with him ever since." "I'm sorry about your family," Sarah said softly. Adam nodded his acknowledgement. "What about yours? What brings a Boston lady to Laredo as a mail-order bride?" Sarah twisted her hands in her lap. "My father died at Antietam. My mother managed to keep us afloat by taking in sewing until last year when the consumption took her too. The medical bills." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. There wasn't much left. Not enough to maintain appearances or make a suitable match in Boston society. The advertisement seemed like a chance for a new beginning. "And now you're getting one, just not the way you planned," Adam observed. "Life rarely goes according to plan, Mr. Ellis," Sarah replied. "I'm learning to adapt." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Call me Adam. Mr. Ellis makes me look around for my father." "Then you must call me Sarah," she returned, feeling a tiny knot of tension ease in her chest. "If we're to be employer and employee, formality seems unnecessary." "Sarah, it is." They fell into a companionable silence as the wagon rolled on. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky, brilliant in a way Sarah had never seen in Boston with its coal smoke and gas lamps. Out here, with no competing light, they seemed close enough to touch. Eventually, Adam pointed to a glow on the horizon. "That's Double Creek. Mrs. Flores keeps a lamp burning in the window until everyone's home safe. Mrs. Flores, our housekeeper. She comes in from town 3 days a week to cook and clean. Her husband Miguel is our best hand with the horses. They live in Laredo with their children, but they've been with the ranch almost as long as I have." As they drew closer, Sarah could make out the shape of a substantial house, not a mansion by Eastern standards, but impressive for the frontier. It was 2 stories, built of sturdy timber with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several smaller buildings clustered nearby, a barn, bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a cookhouse. A woman emerged from the main house as they pulled up, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a lantern high, squinting into the darkness. "You're late, Adam," she called. "Supper's gone cold. Had an errand in town, Mrs. Flores," Adam replied, setting the brake and jumping down from the wagon. He moved to Sarah's side to help her descend. "This is Miss Sarah Campbell. She'll be staying with us, Mrs." Flores's eyebrows shot up as she assessed Sarah, taking in her travel-worn but clearly Eastern-made dress and exhausted demeanor. "Peterson's bride?" she asked bluntly. "I was to be," Sarah confirmed, lifting her chin. "I hadn't received word of his passing." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Lo siento, a shock to us all. The fever took him so quickly." She shifted her gaze to Adam. "And now, Miss Campbell will be helping around the house and with the books," Adam explained. "She needs a place to stay and we need the help. Mrs." Flores nodded slowly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I'll prepare the blue room," she said, "and heat up some supper. The poor girl looks dead on her feet." "Thank you," Sarah said, sincerely grateful for the woman's practical approach. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable. The furniture was solid and well-made, if not fancy. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, with several leather chairs and a sofa arranged before it. Bookshelves lined one wall, a surprise that made Sarah's heart lift slightly. Mrs. Flores led them to a dining room where a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, corn bread, and stewed apples awaited. Sarah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma hit her, and she ate with more enthusiasm than was strictly ladylike. "The blue room is ready, Mrs. Flores announced when they'd finished. "Fresh linens and water for washing. I've laid out one of my night dresses, though it might be short on you, miss." "That's very kind," Sarah said, rising from the table. "I can't thank you enough for your hospitality." "It's Christian charity," the housekeeper replied matter-of-factly. "And I won't have it said that Double Creek turns away those in need." Adam stood as well. "I'll show you to your room. Tomorrow we can discuss your duties once you've had some rest." The blue room, as Mrs. Flores called it, was on the second floor at the end of a hallway. It was simply furnished with a bed, dresser, washstand, and a small writing desk by the window. The walls were painted a soft blue, and white curtains framed a window that would overlook the ranch in daylight. "It's lovely," Sarah said, genuinely pleased. After a week in Mrs. Whittaker's cramped boarding house, this room felt positively luxurious. Adam set her bag by the dresser. "Bathrooms down the hall. We have indoor plumbing. Will was mighty proud of that." Said no ranch of his would have its ladies trudging to an outhouse. Sarah couldn't hide her relief. Indoor plumbing was a luxury she hadn't dared hope for. "Mr. Peterson sounds like he was a thoughtful man." "He was," Adam agreed, his expression somber. "Would have made you a good husband, I think." An awkward silence fell between them. Sarah was acutely aware that she was alone in a bedroom with a man who was not her husband or relative, a scandalous situation by Boston standards. "I should let you rest," Adam said, moving toward the door. "Breakfast is at 6. Mrs. Flores will be leaving after the midday meal since it's her day to be with her family in town, so tomorrow will be a good chance for you to get acquainted with the house." "I'll be ready," Sarah promised. Adam paused at the door. "I'm sorry things didn't work out as you planned, Sarah, but I'm glad you decided to stay." Before she could respond, he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. Sarah stood motionless for a moment, processing the whirlwind that had been this day. She'd arrived in Laredo expecting to be married by sunset. Instead, her intended was dead, and she was now employed as a housekeeper on his ranch, under the supervision of a man she'd just met. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't what she'd planned. But as she changed into the borrowed nightdress and slipped between the clean, lavender-scented sheets, Sarah felt something that had been absent for a long time: hope. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with determination and grace. Sleep claimed her quickly, and for the first time in months, no anxious dreams disturbed her rest. The first golden rays of sunrise were streaming through the curtains when Sarah awoke. For a moment, disorientation gripped her as she stared at the unfamiliar blue walls. Then yesterday's events came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, noting the position of the sun. It must be close to 6 already. She dressed hurriedly in her second dress, a practical navy blue cotton that had seen better days but would serve for housework. Her hair was another matter. Without a lady's maid to help, she could only manage a simple twist pinned at the nape of her neck. It would have to do. The smell of coffee and bacon guided her downstairs. Mrs. Flores was bustling around the kitchen, directing a young man who was carrying in firewood. "Ah, you're up," the housekeeper noted with approval. "Coffee's hot. Sit, eat. Much to do today." The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped. A large cast-iron stove dominated one wall, while a sturdy wooden table occupied the center of the room. Copper pots hung from a rack above, and a pantry door stood ajar, revealing well-stocked shelves. Sarah accepted a mug of strong black coffee and a plate heaped with eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The young man who'd brought in the wood tipped his hat to her before disappearing through a side door. "That's Diego, my nephew," Mrs. Flores explained. "He helps with the heavier work when Miguel is busy with the horses." Adam entered just then, already dressed for the day in work clothes that somehow still managed to look neat and presentable. His blonde hair was damp from washing, and he smelled of soap and the outdoors. "Morning," he said, accepting his own plate from Mrs. Flores. "Sleep well." "Very," Sarah replied. "Thank you again for your kindness." Adam shook his head as he sat across from her. "No need for thanks. It's a fair arrangement, your work for room and board." Sarah nodded, though privately she thought his offer had been more than fair. She was painfully aware that many men would have taken advantage of her desperate situation. "I'll show you the books after breakfast," Adam continued between bites. "Will was meticulous about record keeping, but since his passing, I've fallen behind. If you're comfortable with numbers, that would be a great help." "I managed my mother's household accounts for years," Sarah assured him. "I'm quite proficient with bookkeeping, Mrs. Flores made a satisfied sound as she moved about the kitchen. "Good. A woman should know numbers. My Miguel tried to keep me ignorant when we first married. I showed him quickly that was a mistake." Sarah smiled at the older woman's forthright manner. In Boston, such bluntness would have been considered shockingly inappropriate, but here it felt refreshing. After breakfast, Adam led Sarah to a small study off the main room. A roll-top desk occupied one corner, with ledgers and papers neatly arranged. "We'll kept track of everything," Adam explained, opening the main ledger. "Cattle sales, supply purchases, wages, breeding records. I can handle the ranching side of things, but the paperwork." He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "Numbers and I have never gotten along well." Sarah examined the ledger. Mr. Peterson's handwriting had been precise and orderly, each entry carefully dated and categorized. The system was straightforward enough. "This won't be difficult to maintain," she assured Adam. "I can update everything this morning and show you the monthly summaries when I'm done." Adam's relief was evident. "That would be a great weight off my shoulders. The bank in Laredo has been asking for updated records since Will's passing, and I've been putting them off." As he turned to leave, Sarah called after him, "Adam, what exactly am I to tell people about my position here? If anyone should ask, that is." He paused, considering. "The truth, you're our housekeeper and bookkeeper. There's no shame in honest work." "No, there isn't," Sarah agreed. "But a single woman living in a house with a single man might raise eyebrows, even here. Mrs. Flores is here 3 days a week, and the ranch hands know better than to gossip," Adam replied. "As for the townspeople, well, they'll talk regardless. Best not to worry about it." It was easy for him to say. Sarah thought after he left. A man's reputation could weather far more storms than a woman's. But he was right about one thing: she needed this position, and worrying about gossip wouldn't change her circumstances. The morning passed quickly as Sarah immersed herself in the ranch accounts. By noon, she had updated the ledgers to reflect the past month's transactions, and had even drafted a letter to the bank in Laredo explaining the delay and providing the requested financial statements. Mrs. Flores appeared at the study door just as Sarah was finishing. "Lunch is ready. After, I'll show you what needs doing before I leave for town." Over a simple meal of cold chicken and bread, the housekeeper outlined Sarah's domestic duties. "Floors need sweeping daily, dusting twice a week. Laundry on Mondays, the men's work clothes I do in the big tubs behind the cookhouse, but the household linens and your things can be done here. Adam's shirts need careful ironing." It was more work than Sarah had done in Boston, where her mother had employed a maid of all work, but less than she'd feared. The house, while substantial, was not overly large, and Mrs. Flores kept it in good order. "What about meals?" Sarah asked. "I can cook simple dishes, but nothing elaborate." "I leave stew or cold meat for supper on my off days," Mrs. Flores explained. "Adam's not particular, and the hands eat in the bunkhouse. Their cook is Miguel's cousin. You'll need to prepare breakfast and midday meals on the days I'm not here, but Adam's usually content with eggs and coffee in the morning and sandwiches at noon. After lunch, Mrs. Flores gave Sarah a thorough tour of the house, showing her where cleaning supplies were kept, how to operate the pump for the indoor plumbing, and which linens needed mending. By the time the housekeeper departed for town, Sarah felt reasonably confident in her ability to manage the household. Left to her own devices, she decided to explore the ranch a bit before starting dinner preparations. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive as she stepped onto the wide porch. From this vantage point, she could see the full extent of the main ranch buildings. The large barn, the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, corrals for horses, and in the distance, grazing cattle. Movement caught her eye: Adam on horseback, directing two cowboys as they separated calves from the herd. Even from a distance, his confidence was evident in the way he sat his mount and issued directions. The horse beneath him, a powerful black stallion, responded to the slightest touch of his knees. As if sensing her gaze, Adam looked up toward the house. Seeing her on the porch, he raised a hand in greeting. Sarah returned the gesture, feeling oddly self-conscious. She was turning to go back inside when hoofbeats approached rapidly. A rider was coming up the main drive, a well-dressed man on an expensive-looking bay horse. "Hello there," he called, removing his hat as he drew closer. "You must be the bride we've been hearing about." Sarah tensed. Word traveled fast in small communities, and clearly news of her arrival had already spread. "I'm Sarah Campbell," she replied cautiously. "And you are?" "Samuel Blackburn, madam." He dismounted with a flourish. "I own the Silver Dollar Ranch neighboring Double Creek." Was mighty sorry to hear about Will Peterson's passing. He was a good neighbor. Samuel Blackburn was handsome in a polished way that spoke of wealth and privilege. His clothes were finer than Adam's practical work wear, and his hands showed little evidence of manual labor despite his claim of being a rancher. "Thank you for your condolences," Sarah said carefully, "but I should clarify I never had the chance to marry Mr. Peterson. I arrived yesterday to learn of his passing." Blackburn's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? And yet you're staying at Double Creek. How unusual." His tone carried an insinuation that made Sarah's cheeks flush with indignation. "Mr. Ellis has kindly employed me as housekeeper and bookkeeper until I decide my next steps." "Has he now?" Blackburn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How generous of young Ellis, though I wonder what the good people of Laredo will make of such an arrangement." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of galloping hooves announced Adam's arrival. He pulled his black stallion to a halt between Sarah and their visitor, dust swirling around the animal's legs. "Blackburn," Adam acknowledged, his voice cool. "What brings you to Double Creek?" "Neighborly visit," Blackburn replied smoothly. "Wanted to pay my respects to the new lady of the ranch, though it seems Miss Campbell's status is somewhat ambiguous." Adam dismounted in one fluid motion. Miss Campbell's status is as the valued employee of this ranch, and any suggestion to the contrary would be both incorrect and unwelcome. The tension between the two men was palpable. Sarah had the distinct impression there was history here beyond a simple neighborly dispute. "No offense meant," Blackburn said, though his smile remained sharp. "Just concerned about propriety. A young, unmarried lady living under the same roof as a bachelor. People will talk. People always talk," Adam replied evenly. "Especially those with nothing better to do." "If that's all, Blackburn, we're busy here." The dismissal was clear. Blackburn replaced his hat with deliberate slowness. "Of course, don't let me keep you from your work." His gaze slid to Sarah. "Miss Campbell, should you find your current situation unsuitable, the Silver Dollar would be pleased to offer you alternative employment. My sister is visiting from San Antonio and could use a lady's companion." "That's very kind," Sarah said diplomatically, "but I'm quite satisfied with my position here." Blackburn inclined his head, swung back into his saddle, and with a final assessing look, rode away down the drive. Once he was out of earshot, Sarah turned to Adam. "I take it you and Mr. Blackburn are not on friendly terms." Adam's jaw was tight as he watched the retreating figure. "Samuel Blackburn wants what he can't have, and he's not particular about how he gets it. He's been trying to buy Double Creek for years. Well, wouldn't sell, and neither will I." "Can he cause trouble? About my being here, I mean." Adam's expression softened as he looked at her. "He can try, but Laredo folk aren't as easily scandalized as Easterners might be. Out here, practical arrangements for mutual benefit are understood. Besides, Mrs. Flores's presence several days a week provides sufficient chaperoning to satisfy most." Sarah wasn't entirely convinced, but she nodded. "I should start dinner preparations. Mrs. Flores left a stew that needs heating." "I'll be in once I've seen to the horses," Adam replied. "And Sarah, don't let Blackburn worry you. His opinion matters less than nothing around here." As she walked back to the house, Sarah couldn't help but feel that Adam might be underestimating Samuel Blackburn's capacity for mischief. Men like that, with wealth and connections, could make life very difficult for those who stood in their way. And somehow, she suspected that her presence at Double Creek had given Blackburn new ammunition in whatever feud existed between him and Adam. The stew was simmering nicely by the time Adam returned to the house. He'd washed up, his hair damp and his face clean-shaven. He looked younger without the day's dust on him, closer to his actual age, which Sarah guessed to be around 30. "Smells good," he commented, entering the kitchen where Sarah was slicing bread to accompany the meal. "Mrs. Flores did all the work. I'm just heating it," Sarah admitted. Adam smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Honesty, I appreciate that." They ate in the kitchen rather than the more formal dining room, sitting across from each other at the sturdy wooden table. Sarah found herself studying Adam when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than she'd yet seen, the capable hands that handled knife and fork with unexpected grace. "Tell me about Boston," Adam said suddenly. "I've never been east of the Mississippi." Sarah considered what to share. "It's very different from here. More people, more buildings, less sky. Everything feels close together, crowded. But there's culture, 2 concerts, lectures, libraries. You miss it?" Adam asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. "I miss what it was when my parents were alive," Sarah answered honestly. "The security, the sense of belonging. But the Boston I left behind was a place of debts and disappointments. There wasn't much to miss there." Adam nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Sometimes what we leave behind isn't as important as what we're moving toward." "And what are you moving toward, Adam?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. He seemed equally surprised, but answered nonetheless. "Building something that lasts. Well, gave me a chance when no one else would. Made me his foreman 5 years ago, and when he got sick, he changed his will. Left Double Creek to me instead of his cousins back east." "That explains Blackburn's interest," Sarah observed. "He thought he could easily pressure Will's relatives into selling after his death." "Exactly. Instead, he found me with no intention of going anywhere." Adam's expression hardened briefly. "Blackburn's Silver Dollar Ranch is 10 times the size of Double Creek, but our water rights are what he really wants. The creek that gives this place its name runs year-round, even in drought. That's rare and valuable in these parts. And without it, his expansion plans are limited, Sarah concluded. Adam looked at her with new appreciation. You catch on quick, Sarah smiled. Numbers aren't the only thing I understand. After dinner, they moved to the main room where a small fire warded off the evening chill. Adam selected a book from the shelves, a volume of Emerson's essays, and settled into one of the leather chairs. Without asking, he handed Sarah another book, Pride and Prejudice, by Jane Austen. Will's wife loved this one, he explained at Sarah's questioning look. Before she died of childbed fever. Their son too. That was 8 years ago, but Will kept all her books. Sarah accepted the novel, touched by the gesture. Thank you, it's a favorite of mine as well. They read in companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional turning of pages. It was so peaceful, so unexpectedly comfortable, that Sarah found herself relaxing fully for the first time since leaving Boston. When the mantel clock struck 9, Adam closed his book. Early start tomorrow. The cattle buyer from San Antonio is coming to look at our stock. Sarah rose, placing her book carefully on a side table. Of course, I'll have breakfast ready at 6. Adam stood as well, suddenly looking awkward. Sarah, I want to make sure you're comfortable here, if there's anything you need or if you're unhappy with any aspect of our arrangement. I'm more than satisfied, Sarah assured him. You've been exceedingly kind. He nodded, seemingly relieved. Good night, then. Good night, Adam. In her blue room, Sarah changed into her nightdress and sat at the small writing desk, staring out at the stars that blanketed the Texas sky. Her circumstances were not what she'd expected when she boarded that train in Boston, but there was something about Double Creek that already felt more like home than the city where she'd spent her entire life. And there was something about Adam Ellis, his quiet strength, his integrity, his unexpected kindness that made her heart beat a little faster when he looked at her. It was foolish, she knew. She was his employee, not a potential bride. And yet. With a sigh, Sarah blew out her lamp and climbed into bed. Dreams would have to wait. For now, reality demanded her full attention. The next weeks fell into a pattern that suited Sarah's practical nature. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings maintaining the ranch accounts and her afternoons on household duties. Mrs. Flores came on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, teaching Sarah the particulars of running a ranch household, everything from how to properly season cast iron cookware to which vendors in Laredo could be trusted for fair prices. Adam was often out on the ranch from dawn until dusk, working alongside his men as they tended cattle, mended fences, and prepared for the fall roundup. But evenings found them together in the main room, reading or talking about their days. Sometimes Adam would play the battered guitar that hung on the wall, his strong fingers coaxing surprisingly gentle melodies from the strings. It was during one such evening, nearly a month after Sarah's arrival, that Adam broached a subject they'd been dancing around. The church social is next Saturday, he said casually, setting aside his guitar. Whole town attends. Thought you might like to go. Sarah looked up from her mending, surprised. She hadn't left the ranch since her arrival, partly from having no reason to go to town and partly from uncertainty about her reception there. As your employee, she asked, trying to understand what he was proposing. Adam shifted in his chair. As my guest, my friend. The word seemed inadequate somehow, but Sarah understood his caution. People will talk. Let them, Adam said with a shrug. You've been here long enough that the initial gossip has died down. And it would do you good to meet some of the townspeople under more favorable circumstances than your arrival. Sarah considered this. A church social would be respectable enough, and she did long for female companionship beyond Mrs. Flores's brusque presence. I'd like that, she decided. Though I don't have anything suitable to wear for a social occasion. Adam looked relieved at her acceptance. There's a dressmaker in town, Mrs. Chen. She's from San Francisco originally but married a local shopkeeper. She could make you something if you'd like. The offer was generous, especially as Sarah had yet to receive any wages. Adam had explained that the ranch was cash poor until the fall cattle sale, but had assured her that her salary was being recorded and would be paid in full. "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose," Sarah began. "It's not an imposition," Adam interrupted. "It's an advance on your wages, and frankly, you've earned it. The books are in better order than they've ever been, and the house runs smoother than when Will was alive." His sincerity was impossible to doubt, and Sarah found herself agreeing. "Thank you, I would appreciate that." 2 days later, Sarah found herself in Mrs. Chen's small shop in Laredo being measured for a new dress. The dressmaker was a tiny, elegant woman with quick hands and quicker eyes. "Blue," she declared after assessing Sarah, "to match your employer's eyes." Sarah blushed. "That's not," Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. "I have been dressing women for 20 years, Miss Campbell. I know when a lady wishes to impress a gentleman." Rather than argue, Sarah allowed herself to be guided toward a bolt of cornflower blue cotton with tiny white flowers embroidered along its length. It was pretty without being ostentatious, practical enough for a church social while still being feminine. "Can it be ready by Saturday?" Sarah asked, stroking the fabric, "For Double Creek Ranch?" "Yes," Mrs. Chen assured her. "Mr. Ellis pays his bills promptly and never haggles over fair prices. Such customers receive priority." As they were finalizing the details, the shop door opened, admitting a well-dressed woman approximately Sarah's age. She was beautiful in a polished way, with golden blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style and a dress that spoke of considerable expense. "Miss Blackburn, Mrs. Chen greeted the newcomer with a respectful bow. "Your dress is ready for final fitting." The name caught Sarah's attention immediately. This must be Samuel Blackburn's sister from San Antonio, the one who supposedly needed a companion. Miss Blackburn's assessing gaze swept over Sarah. "You must be Miss Campbell. My brother mentioned you were staying at Double Creek." "I am," Sarah confirmed, straightening her posture instinctively. "And you are Miss Victoria Blackburn, I presume?" "Indeed." Her smile was as practiced as her brother's. "Such a shame about your unfortunate circumstances. Arriving to find your intended deceased must have been quite a shock." The sympathy in her voice didn't reach her eyes, which remained coolly evaluative. Sarah had encountered enough society women in Boston to recognize the look of someone determining where another stood in the social hierarchy. "Life is full of unexpected turns," Sarah replied evenly. "Fortunately, I've found a suitable position that allows me to remain in Laredo while I consider my options. Yes, as Adam Ellis's housekeeper." Victoria Blackburn managed to make the occupation sound decidedly unsavory. "How resourceful of you, Mrs. Chen," observing the exchange with sharp eyes, intervened. "Miss Campbell's dress will be ready on Friday. Shall I have it delivered to Double Creek, or would you prefer to collect it?" "Delivered would be best, thank you," Sarah answered, grateful for the interruption. As she prepared to leave, Victoria Blackburn spoke again. "You're attending the church social then? How nice. It will give everyone a chance to meet you properly." Her smile sharpened. "My brother will be pleased to see you there. He's been quite interested in your situation." The implication was clear. Samuel Blackburn was still intent on causing trouble. Sarah forced a polite smile. "How kind of him to concern himself with my affairs. Please assure your brother that I am perfectly content with my current arrangements." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly at Sarah's composed response. "I'll be sure to tell him. Good day, Miss Campbell." The encounter left Sarah unsettled. On the ride back to Double Creek, Adam had sent Diego with the wagon to fetch her. She found herself worrying about what the Blackburns might do to undermine her position. Adam was waiting on the porch when she returned, his expression brightening visibly at the sight of her. It was these small reactions, these unguarded moments, that gave Sarah hope that perhaps their relationship might someday evolve beyond employer and employee. "How was town?" he asked, helping her down from the wagon. "Illuminating," Sarah replied. "I met Miss Victoria Blackburn at the dressmaker's." Adam's smile faded. And I believe the Blackburns are planning something for the church social. She made a point of mentioning her brother's continued interest in my situation." Adam's jaw tightened. "Blackburn doesn't know when to quit, but don't worry about the social. The people of Laredo have known me for 15 years. They won't be easily swayed by whatever tale he's spinning. Sarah wasn't so certain, but she nodded. The dress will be ready on Friday. Mrs. Chen is having it delivered. Good. Adam's expression softened. I'm looking forward to Saturday. It's been a while since I've had cause to attend a social event. The genuine warmth in his voice chased away some of Sarah's anxiety. Whatever the Blackburns might have planned, she would face it with Adam at her side. Friday arrived with a sense of anticipation that Sarah hadn't felt in years. The dress was delivered, as promised, a simple but elegant creation that fit perfectly and brought out the auburn highlights in her hair and the green of her eyes. Mrs. Chen had included a matching ribbon for her hair and had even hemmed the skirt to a practical length that wouldn't drag in the dust of Laredo's streets. Saturday dawned clear and mild, a perfect early autumn day. Sarah spent extra time on her appearance, arranging her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical twist. When she descended the stairs, Adam was waiting in the main room, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a blue tie that nearly matched her dress. He stared at her for a long moment, something in his eyes making her heart beat faster. "You look beautiful," he said finally, the simple honesty of the statement more affecting than any flowery compliment. "Thank you," Sarah replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "You look very handsome yourself." Adam offered his arm and she took it, hyper-aware of his solid presence beside her. They rode to town in the freshly cleaned wagon, the same one that had brought her to Double Creek that first night, but somehow everything felt different now. The social was being held on the grounds of Laredo's small church, with tables set up under the shade of large oak trees. Lanterns hung from branches, ready to provide light when evening fell. A small group of musicians was setting up on a wooden platform, and the air was rich with the smells of home cooking as women arranged covered dishes on long tables. Their arrival caused a stir. Sarah could feel the curious gazes following them as Adam helped her down from the wagon. He kept her hand tucked in the crook of his arm as he guided her through the crowd, stopping to introduce her to various townspeople. To Sarah's surprise and relief, most received her warmly. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly at the dress. The storekeeper, Mr. Finch, told her he'd heard good things about her bookkeeping skills from the bank manager. The sheriff's wife, a motherly woman named Mrs. Turner, insisted Sarah must join the ladies' quilting circle that met on Thursday afternoons. "Don't mind the gossips, Mrs. Turner whispered as she pressed a glass of lemonade into Sarah's hand. "We all know Adam Ellis is a man of honor. If he says you're his employee, that's what you are. And if someday you become more," she winked, "well, that would surprise exactly no one." Sarah was still processing this forthright statement when she became aware of a change in the atmosphere. Looking up, she saw Samuel Blackburn and his sister approaching, accompanied by an older man in clerical dress who she assumed must be the local minister. "Reverend Pierce," Adam greeted the minister politely, though his posture had tensed. "Miss Blackburn, Samuel." "Ellis," Blackburn returned, his smile not reaching his eyes. "And Miss Campbell, how lovely to see you again." Reverend Pierce, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, looked at Sarah with genuine interest. "Miss Campbell, I've heard much about you. Welcome to our community." "Thank you, Reverend," Sarah replied. "I'm grateful for the warm reception I've received." "Not everyone has been so welcoming, I fear," Victoria Blackburn interjected smoothly. "Some have expressed concern about the propriety of a young, unmarried woman residing at a bachelor's ranch." There it was the attack Sarah had been anticipating. She kept her expression serene, though she could feel Adam's arm tense beneath her hand. "I can assure you, Miss Blackburn, that there is nothing improper about my position at Double Creek. I am employed as housekeeper and bookkeeper with Mrs. Flores, present 3 days a week as both assistant and chaperone." Reverend Pierce nodded. "Very sensible arrangement. The frontier demands practical solutions to life's challenges." Samuel Blackburn was not so easily deterred. "Still, Reverend, you must admit it's unusual." A mail-order bride arriving to find her intended deceased, then immediately taking up residence with the young man who inherited his property. It raises questions. The minister's expression cooled slightly. The only question it raises in my mind, Mr. Blackburn, is why you seem so determined to cast aspersions on two people who, by all accounts, are conducting themselves honorably. Victoria Blackburn tried another approach. We're merely concerned for Miss Campbell's reputation. A young lady from Boston society must be accustomed to certain standards of propriety that the frontier may overlook. Before Sarah could respond, Mrs. Turner appeared at her elbow. Speaking of propriety, Miss Blackburn, I couldn't help noticing your dress. Quite the daring neckline for a church social, isn't it? Her tone was honey-sweet, but her meaning clear. Now, Sarah, you simply must try Mrs. Flores's empanadas. She only makes them for special occasions. With that, she deftly extracted Sarah from the uncomfortable conversation, leading her toward the food tables. Adam followed after exchanging a few more words with the Blackburns and the minister. Thank you, Sarah murmured to Mrs. Turner. Don't mention it, dear. The Blackburns have been trying to get their hands on Double Creek for years. They'll use any weapon that comes to hand, including maligning a lady's reputation. The incident might have cast a shadow over the entire event, but to Sarah's surprise, it seemed to have the opposite effect. Word spread quickly through the gathering, and she found herself surrounded by townspeople eager to demonstrate their support. The mayor's wife insisted Sarah sit with her during the musical performance. The schoolteacher, Miss Abernathy, discussed books with her at length. Even the taciturn blacksmith, Mr. Schmidt, made a point of telling Adam within Sarah's hearing that Double Creek had never looked better. By the time the dancing began, Sarah's initial anxiety had faded. The musicians struck up a lively tune, and couples began to form sets for a Virginia reel. May I have this dance? Adam asked, extending his hand to Sarah. I'd be delighted, she answered, placing her hand in his. Adam proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Sarah, who had attended numerous balls in Boston, matched him move for move. They came together and separated, turned and circled as the music dictated. But Sarah was most aware of the moments when his hand clasped hers, when his eyes held hers during a turn. As the evening progressed, they danced again and again. A waltz provided the closest contact yet, Adam's hand warm at her waist, her hand resting on his shoulder. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years, and Sarah found herself wishing the music would never end. You're full of surprises, Miss Campbell, Adam said softly, his blue eyes intent on her face. I didn't expect such an accomplished dancer. As are you, Mr. Ellis, she returned. Where does a Texas cowboy learn to waltz? A smile tugged at his mouth. Will's wife insisted. Said no man under her roof would embarrass her at social functions by clomping around like a newborn colt. The mention of Will's wife reminded Sarah of their actual relationship, and she felt a momentary pang. What was she doing, allowing herself to feel this way about her employer? It could only lead to complications, to disappointment. Adam seemed to sense her withdrawal. What's wrong? Nothing, Sarah said quickly. I'm just remembering my position. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something like determination. Sarah, but whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by Samuel Blackburn, who appeared beside them as the waltz ended. May I have the next dance, Miss Campbell? He asked with exaggerated courtesy. Sarah hesitated, reluctant to leave Adam's side but aware that refusing would create a scene. Of course, Mr. Blackburn. Adam released her with obvious reluctance, his eyes conveying a silent message, be careful. Samuel Blackburn was a technically proficient dancer, but his touch made Sarah want to recoil. His palm against hers felt clammy, his grip on her waist slightly too tight. You dance well, Miss Campbell, he commented as they moved through the figures of a country dance. A reminder of your genteel upbringing. Thank you, Sarah replied neutrally. It must be difficult, adjusting to life on a small ranch after Boston society, the manual labor, the isolation, the limited company. His insinuation was clear and Sarah's temper flared. On the contrary, Mr. Blackburn, I find honest work and genuine companions far preferable to idleness and false friends. His smile tightened. How admirably democratic of you. Still, a woman of your background deserves better than to be a glorified servant. My offer of employment for my sister still stands. The salary would be generous, the work much less demanding. I'm quite satisfied with my current position, Sarah replied firmly. Blackburn's expression hardened. You should consider your future more carefully, Miss Campbell. Ellis may have charmed you, but he's playing a dangerous game. Double Creek is failing. The only reason he hasn't sold to me already is stubborn pride. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inwardly she was processing this claim against what she knew from the ranch accounts. It was true that Double Creek's finances were tight, but the upcoming cattle sale would bring in sufficient funds to cover expenses until spring. They were far from failing. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackburn, but I trust my own assessment of the situation. His grip on her waist tightened fractionally. Your loyalty is touching, if misplaced. When Ellis is forced to sell, and he will be, where will that leave you? A fallen woman with no prospects, far from home. The music ended before Sarah could respond to this blatant threat. Adam was at her side almost immediately, his expression tight with barely suppressed anger. Thank you for the dance, Mr. Blackburn, Sarah said with icy politeness. If you'll excuse me. Without waiting for his response, she turned away, allowing Adam to guide her through the crowd toward the refreshment table. His hand at the small of her back was reassuring after Blackburn's unwelcome touch. What did he say to you? Adam asked in a low voice. Nothing worth repeating, Sarah replied, though he did claim that Double Creek is failing and that you'll be forced to sell to him soon. Adam's expression darkened. That's his wishful thinking. We're tight on cash until the cattle sale, but we're far from failing. That's what I gathered from the accounts, Sarah agreed. Though there is the matter of the bank note coming due in November. Adam looked surprised. You saw that in the books, of course. It's a substantial amount, but the projected income from the cattle sale should cover it with some margin to spare, assuming the prices hold steady. A slow smile spread across Adam's face. You really are remarkable, you know that. Most women wouldn't understand the first thing about banknotes and cattle futures. Most women aren't raised by a father who believed his daughter should understand business matters, Sarah replied, pleased by his approval. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with no further interference from the Blackburns. As the social wound down and families began to depart, Adam and Sarah made their farewells and headed toward their wagon. They were nearly there when Reverend Pierce approached, a kind smile on his face. Miss Campbell, Mr. Ellis. A moment before you go, they stopped, and Sarah noticed that the minister was carrying a book that looked like a Bible. I wanted to thank you both for attending tonight, he began. It's good to see Double Creek represented at community functions again. Thank you for making me feel welcome, Reverend, Sarah replied. The older man's expression grew more serious. I also wanted to address the concerns that were raised earlier. While I believe your arrangement is entirely proper, given the circumstances, there will always be those who seek to find fault where none exists. Adam shifted beside her. We're aware of that, Reverend, but I won't let gossip dictate how I run my ranch or who I employ. Admirable, the minister nodded, but perhaps there's a simpler solution. He held up the book in his hands. I'm authorized to perform marriages in the state of Texas. The arrangement you currently have could be made permanent, eliminating any cause for speculation and securing Miss Campbell's position. Sarah felt as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. Was the Reverend suggesting what she thought he was? Adam appeared equally stunned. Are you suggesting we marry, for propriety's sake? Reverend Pierce smiled gently. I'm suggesting that sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. I've observed you both this evening. It's clear there's mutual respect, even affection. Many successful marriages have been built on less. Sarah couldn't look at Adam, afraid of what she might see in his face. The idea of marrying him had crossed her mind, of course it had, but as a romantic fantasy, not as a practical arrangement proposed by a well-meaning minister. That's a significant decision to make on the spur of the moment, Adam said carefully. One that deserves proper consideration. Of course, the Reverend agreed. I merely wish to offer the option. Think on it, both of you. He nodded politely and walked away, leaving them in a silence laden with unspoken thoughts. The ride back to Double Creek was quiet, both of them lost in their own reflections. The suggestion hung between them like a tangible thing, impossible to ignore yet difficult to address directly. It wasn't until they reached the ranch, with the house dark and silent before them, that Adam finally spoke. "I'm sorry about that," he said, helping Sarah down from the wagon. "Reverend Pierce meant well, but he put you in an awkward position." "And you as well," Sarah replied, gathering her courage, though perhaps his suggestion isn't entirely without merit. Adam's gaze sharpened in the moonlight. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I mean that our current arrangement, while satisfactory in practical terms, does leave us both vulnerable to gossip and interference, and it leaves my position here somewhat tenuous." "I would never dismiss you without cause," Adam said quickly. "You should know that." "I do," Sarah assured him. "But circumstances change. The future is uncertain, and if there are other reasons why a more permanent arrangement might be desirable." She trailed off, suddenly terrified that she had misread everything: his kindness, his respect, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. Adam was very still, his expression unreadable in the silvery moonlight. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "are you proposing marriage to me?" The directness of the question startled a laugh from her. "I suppose I am, in a rather roundabout way." "Why?" The single word held a wealth of questions. Sarah gathered her courage. "Because I've come to care for you, because I believe we could build something good together, because when I think of my future, I want it to be here at Double Creek, with you." Adam moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face with exquisite gentleness. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped off that train," he admitted, his voice low and intense. "But I couldn't say anything. You were vulnerable, dependent on my goodwill. It wouldn't have been honorable." Sarah's heart soared at his words. "And now you've proposed to me," Adam said with a hint of wonder in his voice, "which suggests we're on more equal footing than I realized." "Is that a yes?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. In answer, Adam lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost reverent, but deepened as Sarah responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart beating rapidly beneath her palm, matching the pace of her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "That's a yes," he confirmed, "but not because of what people might say or to secure your position or any practical reason at all. Yes, because I love you, Sarah Campbell, and I want to build a life with you." Tears of joy pricked at Sarah's eyes. "I love you too, Adam. I never expected to find you or this place, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." They might have stayed there all night, wrapped in each other's arms under the vast Texas sky, but eventually reason prevailed. With one last, lingering kiss, Adam escorted Sarah to the door of the house that would soon be truly hers. "We'll ride into town tomorrow," he said. "Speak to Reverend Pierce. And Mrs. Chen," Sarah added with a smile, "I'll need a wedding dress." The joy in Adam's eyes was answer enough. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Blackburn's schemes, the financial pressures of running the ranch, the adjustments of married life, they would face them together. From the moment Adam had picked up her bag at the train depot and said those simple words, "Come home," Sarah's life had changed course. Not in the way she'd expected, but in the way she now knew she was always meant to find. The wedding took place 2 weeks later on a perfect autumn day. The small church in Laredo was filled to capacity with townspeople and neighboring ranchers, all eager to witness the union of Double Creek's owner and the Eastern lady who had captured his heart. Sarah wore a simple gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Chen had worked day and night to complete, with her mother's brooch pinned over her heart and wildflowers in her hair. Samuel Blackburn and his sister were conspicuously absent, though rumor had it they had departed for San Antonio immediately after learning of the engagement. Their absence was a relief, allowing the day to proceed without tension or conflict. As Sarah walked down the aisle toward Adam, her heart so full it threatened to overflow, she reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. The death of her parents, the financial hardship, the desperate decision to become a mail-order bride, all painful at the time, but all leading her to this moment, to this man. Adam's face as she approached him at the altar was a study in barely contained emotion. His blue eyes never left hers as she placed her hand in his, as they spoke their vows, as Reverend Pierce pronounced them husband and wife. And when he kissed her, sealing their union before God and community, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. The celebration afterward at Double Creek was joyous and relaxed. Tables were set up under the trees, laden with food contributed by half the women in Laredo. Mrs. Flores, beaming with pride, had outdone herself with a wedding cake decorated with sugar flowers. Music and laughter filled the air as the sun began to set, painting the sky in the same golden hues that had greeted Sarah on her first morning in Texas. "Happy, Mrs. Ellis?" Adam asked, coming to stand beside her as she took a moment alone on the porch. "Perfectly," Sarah replied, leaning into his side as his arm wrapped around her waist. "Though I'm still getting used to the name." "It suits you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It does, doesn't it?" Sarah smiled up at her husband. Feeling a contentment she had never known was possible, almost as if it was always meant to be mine. Their guests departed as evening deepened, leaving the newlyweds alone at last. Hand in hand, they walked through their home truly theirs now, together extinguishing lamps and closing doors. When they reached the master bedroom, Adam paused, suddenly shy. "I had the blue room repainted," he said. "Thought you might like to keep it as a sitting room or a place for your books." Sarah was touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, though I think I'll be quite content right here." She gestured to the large bedroom with its sturdy four-poster bed, now covered with a wedding quilt made by the ladies of Laredo as a gift. Adam's eyes darkened as he drew her into his arms. "I want you to be happy here, Sarah, always." "I will be," she promised. "We will be." And as they came together as husband and wife for the first time, Sarah knew that all the hardships, all the uncertainty, all the fear had been worth it for the love of a good man and the promise of a future built together. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The cattle sale that fall was successful enough to pay off the bank note with some to spare, easing the immediate financial pressure on Double Creek. Samuel Blackburn made one final attempt to acquire the ranch, offering a sum that would have tempted many men, but Adam refused without hesitation. "This land isn't just mine anymore," he told Sarah after declining Blackburn's offer. "It's ours, and someday it will belong to our children." Some things aren't for sale at any price. Their first child, a son they named William after the man who had brought them together, arrived the following summer, a healthy, robust baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Eleanor, named for Sarah's mother. And 3 years after that, another son, Michael, completed their family. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Sarah's head for figures and Adam's practical knowledge of cattle ranching proved to be a powerful combination. They expanded cautiously, adding land when they could afford it, improving their stock, investing in better equipment. By the time their children were old enough for school, Double Creek had become one of the most successful medium-sized ranches in the county. Sarah never lost her love of books and learning. When Eleanor reached school age, Sarah began teaching her children at home, using the blue room as a classroom. Eventually, other ranch children joined them, and before long, Sarah was running an informal school that served the educational needs of several neighboring families. Adam continued to work alongside his men, leading by example and earning their unwavering loyalty. But he always made time for his family, teaching William to ride, helping Eleanor with her first garden, rocking Michael to sleep when he was colicky. Each evening, no matter how demanding the day had been, he would sit with Sarah on the porch, watching the sunset and sharing the day's events. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam presented Sarah with a gift that brought tears to her eyes. A framed photograph of them together, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through Laredo the previous month. Beside it was a small velvet box containing a gold locket. "Open it," Adam urged softly. Inside was a miniature sketch of the train depot in Laredo, exquisitely rendered by a local artist. Engraved on the opposite side were the words that had changed her life. "Come home." "So you never forget how our story began," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. "And how grateful I am that you said yes." Sarah closed her fingers around the precious gift. "As if I could ever forget the moment my life truly began. As the children grew, so did Double Creek." William showed a natural aptitude for ranching, absorbing his father's knowledge and developing his own innovations. Eleanor, bright and curious, excelled in her studies, and dreamed of attending college in the East, a dream her parents encouraged, though Adam privately confessed to Sarah that the thought of his daughter so far away terrified him. Michael, the youngest, combined his mother's head for numbers with an unexpected talent for horses that made him invaluable during the seasonal roundups. The Blackburns eventually sold the Silver Dollar Ranch and departed Texas entirely, moving to California where, rumor had it, Samuel had lost much of his fortune in unwise investments. Their departure removed the last shadow from the Ellis family's happiness. Mrs. Flores remained a fixture at Double Creek well into her old age, teaching Sarah the secrets of her empanadas and eventually passing the torch to Miguel's daughter, Rosa, who took over the household duties as the original housekeeper's health declined. When Mrs. Flores passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, the entire community mourned her loss, but none more deeply than Sarah, who had come to love the brusque, kind-hearted woman like a mother. Time brought changes to Laredo as well. The railroad expanded, bringing more settlers and more commerce. Streets were paved, electric lights installed, telephones connected. The small frontier town grew into a bustling small city, and with it came new opportunities and challenges. Through it all, Double Creek remained a constant evolving with the times, but maintaining the spirit and integrity that Adam and Sarah had built together. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, but the porch where they sat each evening remained the same, a place of peace and connection at the end of busy days. On the evening of their 25th wedding anniversary, with their children grown and the ranch more prosperous than ever, Adam and Sarah once again found themselves alone on that porch, watching the sun set over the land they had nurtured together. "Do you ever regret it?" Adam asked suddenly, his hand warm around hers. "Coming west, marrying me instead of the man you were meant to meet." Sarah looked at her husband, at the face she had loved for a quarter-century older now, lined with experience, but still as handsome to her as it had been that first day at the depot. His hair was streaked with silver, his shoulders slightly stooped from years of physical labor, but his blue eyes were as bright and clear as ever, filled with the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. "Never," she answered truthfully. "Not for a single moment. William Peterson's death was a tragedy, but it led me to you. And you, Adam Ellis, have given me more happiness than I ever dreamed possible." Adam pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders as familiar and comforting as the landscape before them. "When I saw you sitting alone at that depot, I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever met, coming all that way by yourself, facing disappointment with such dignity. I knew right then that you were someone special." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, remembering that day with perfect clarity, the fear, the uncertainty, but also the first stirrings of hope when this tall stranger had picked up her bag and uttered those simple, life-changing words. "Do you know," she said softly, "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you said come home, not because you were offering me shelter or employment, but because in that moment, it felt like you were offering me exactly what I had been searching for my entire life, a place to belong." Adam pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And you have belonged here every day since. You made Double Creek a home, Sarah, not just for me or for our children, but for everyone who passes through our gate. That's a rare gift." As the last rays of sunlight gilded the Texas landscape they both loved, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened young woman alone at a train depot to the confident, loved matriarch of a thriving ranch and family. It hadn't been the life she had expected, but it had been infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. "I love you, Adam Ellis," she said, turning to meet his gaze. "Today and always." His smile, as warm and genuine as the day she had met him, was all the answer she needed. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, just as they had faced every challenge and celebrated every joy for the past 25 years. Home, Sarah thought as Adam's arms enfolded her. After all this time, that simple word still held the promise it had contained on that fateful day at the Laredo depot. Home wasn't just Double Creek with its sturdy house and productive land. Home was Adam's love, their children's laughter, the life they had built together. And as the stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, Sarah Campbell Ellis knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she was meant to be.